A lonely, ugly, and disgusting boy who lives with literal trash bags gets a maid who is secretly an ex-assassin. Living his usual student life, one day Hitoyoshi is visited by a maid who claims to be an agent looking for a job. As she walks toward the Yokoya residence, the bell on her clothing jingles with each step, making noise wherever she goes. Meanwhile, in his incredibly messy room, the boy sleeps soundly until the doorbell rings. Hitoyoshi groggily pulls himself downstairs and checks the door camera to see who's outside. A beautiful woman stands there, apologizing for the disturbance by expressing her wish to be hired as the maid. He invites her immediately, apologizing for the mess and explaining that his parents are away. While getting a drink from the kitchen, he realizes he just let a complete stranger into his home without thinking, so he tries to remain polite but watches her carefully. In his mind, she might be trying to sell something or suggest something shady, so he figures it's best to stall while he thinks of a way to send her off. He asks if she's worked as a maid before, and she responds that she has, but her previous jobs were quite different. They involved eliminating traitors who betrayed her former boss. She's actually here because her old employer recommended her. Hitoyoshi thinks she must be joking, but something tells him she's not, and fear begins to creep in. Now, getting this stranger out of his house isn't just a matter of manners, it's urgent. He then asks if she has any connection to his family since she came with the recommendation. The maid explains that Hitoyoshi is the grandson of a woman who once lived in the house of the second son of the cousin of the wife of her employer's heir. Hitoyoshi instinctively blurts out that he's practically a stranger, but quickly adjusts his posture to avoid being disrespectful. To shift the conversation, he asks about the kind of executions she specializes in. She takes him outside and demonstrates by throwing sharp metal objects at a tree. Realizing she's serious, he insists he doesn't want anyone unalived and that he doesn't even know the employer she mentioned, so he won't be hiring her. She apologizes for wasting his time and leaves without causing trouble. Hitoyoshi wonders if it was all a dream until he notices something left in the grass. Meanwhile, the maid had already anticipated this outcome, but her concern now is where to go next. As she waits for the subway, Hitoyoshi appears in the distance, holding a bell she accidentally left behind. Distracted, he rushes to return it, not noticing a speeding truck. The maid instinctively pulls him out of danger, saving his life. The driver yells at Hitoyoshi for his carelessness and drives off. The maid, breathless, admits she's never saved anyone before. Hitoyoshi, still confused, hands her the bell and they part ways until he suddenly changes his mind, saying he needs a maid after all and offering her the job at his house. Without hesitation, she returns to the Yokoya residence and lays out several knives on the living room table, explaining that these were likely humanity's first tools, simple yet deadly in skilled hands. Hitoyoshi interrupts, saying he needs help with cleaning, not this. The maid, thinking he's speaking in code about unaliving someone, asks who needs cleaning up. He points to the trash bags in the room, assuming that's clear enough, but she misinterprets it, believing a person is inside one of the bags. Frustrated, Hitoyoshi clarifies he needs an actual maid to sweep and mop the floors. The maid asks if she'll be hired if she does that, but once the agreement is made, it's obvious she has no idea how to use a mop and bucket. She fumbles and slips, almost falling but catching herself, just as the bucket she threw lands squarely on her head. Embarrassed by her poor performance, she doubts she'll get the job. Hitoyoshi takes the bucket off her head, apologizes for asking her to do something unfamiliar, and offers to help clean together. By late afternoon, the house is spotless. After thanking her, he notices she seems uncomfortable with the gratitude. Realizing they skipped lunch, he asks if she can cook, but she says nothing. He reassures her and suggests she take a bath while he handles the meal. While waiting in the bathtub, she finds herself thinking about the young man thanking her for her work. Meanwhile, in the living room, Hitoyoshi reflects that he should be enjoying summer vacation with his parents, but instead is stuck with an assassin maid who can't clean or cook. What worries him even more is the idea of her coming out of the bathroom wrapped only in a towel. He wouldn't know how to handle that. He tries to mentally prepare, but before he can gather his thoughts, she emerges fully dressed, breaking his illusion. She then starts chopping cabbage for dinner, a task she does flawlessly, tossing it in the air and shredding it effortlessly. Once done, all that's left is to make instant miso soup to go with the tonkatsu. She comments that she's unfamiliar with these dishes but doesn't care since she's only ever eaten to survive, without concern for taste or presentation. Moved by her words, Hitoyoshi assures her she'll love the tonkatsu, made by the Katsuda couple, famous for their cooking for over 60 years. There are even rumors that celebrities disguise themselves to buy from them. Despite his enthusiasm, the maid remains unimpressed, leaving him a bit frustrated, but he decides to show her what he's talking about firsthand. After dividing the tonkatsu between them, he added cabbage to their plates and handed one to the maid, as he liked to call her. Taking the chance, he asked for her name, but she replied she didn't have one, as her employers always named her whatever they wished. She said he could call her whatever he liked. Not being good with names, Hideyoshi chose to keep calling her Maid. She noticed she never cared what people called her, but this time felt different. Finally, it was time to eat, and Hideyoshi eagerly awaited her reaction to the food. As usual, she couldn't tell if it was good or bad, but recalling a distant memory, she said the food felt warm and comforting. She thought about how both the bath and the meal were warm, just like the person in front of her. Hideyoshi then mentioned her room was ready at the end of the hall on the second floor and that the bed was made. If anything wasn't right, she should let him know. The woman was surprised he had prepared the room for her, which took her back to a memory where she held a mashi. A man in the background had said she passed the test, commenting that her skin was as white as snow and her heart just as cold. On that day, the man had given her a name, but now she preferred not to have one, rather than be called cold-hearted. Hideyoshi interrupted her thoughts, offering the tonkatsu sauce, saying the dish wasn't complete without it. Without a second thought, she poured the sauce over her food and took a bite. The taste was so incredible that she couldn't hide her excitement and had to express her joy. At 3 a.m. the next day, Hideyoshi woke up drenched in tears after having a dream he hadn't experienced in years. Hungry, he went downstairs to find some instant ramen. On the way, he heard a strange sound from the kitchen. Startled, he recalled the maid mentioning she was a professional assassin. Summoning his courage, he peeked in and saw the maid with a red stain on her face. At first, he thought it was blood, but when she turned, he realized it was tonkatsu sauce. Embarrassed, the maid apologized, but since it was nothing serious, Hideyoshi let it go. She explained that if she passes away tomorrow, she wanted to taste that sauce one last time. Wanting to make it special, Hideyoshi quickly made a makeshift fondue using the sauce, though there wasn't much to elevate it. The maid didn't care, she just wanted to eat everything with the sauce she loved. After the meal, she asked if Hideyoshi had a nightmare, as she had heard him groaning. Worried he might also be an assassin, she entered his room and found him calling out for his mother. The maid, too, had a dream where she talked to the tonkatsu sauce, which told her it would never run out no matter how much she enjoyed it. Yet, when she began eating, she woke up. At least her dream had been different this time, as she usually had nightmares. That's why she felt sympathy for the boy having such a disturbing dream. She understood that experience all too well. Hideyoshi brushed it off, saying it was just a recurring dream he had now and then. In his mind, he replayed scenes from his childhood, where he kept calling for his mother as she walked away. He explained that he could only sleep peacefully when resting in his mother's lap on nights when he had those nightmares. Hearing this, the maid found a way to comfort him and offered her lap for him to rest on. Her thoughts drifted to the man who always said she was destined to take lives, and that memory darkened her spirit. But when Hideyoshi rested his head on her lap, the world around her seemed to brighten. Both of them felt awkward about the situation, but neither pulled away. The maid, reflecting on the changes since arriving at the house, felt her body heat up, her breath shallow. It was as if her blood was rushing too fast, threatening to burst out. The sensation reminded her of the rush she felt in battle, facing multiple foes. But now the situation is entirely different. Her body moved on its own and she couldn't understand why. She just wanted to know the reason. The next day, while cleaning, she cut a cardboard box into pieces. Hideyoshi, impressed by her efficiency, later found a strange animal left at his doorstep with a note that read, "Please adopt me." The letter explained the animal had been bought as a Pomeranian, but turned out to be a breed that grew too large, so the owner abandoned it. Hideyoshi criticized the selfishness of the act, but decided to adopt the creature, knowing it would die on the streets. The maid, however, remarked that if the animal was meant to survive, it would, no matter the challenges. This, she explained, was animal instinct. Sometimes pity might not save a life, and being abandoned was part of its fate. If not forced to be resilient, such fragile beings are bound to perish on the sidelines. If Hideyoshi chooses to save this life without careful thought, the repercussions will eventually catch up to the animal. After this somber remark, she questioned whether Hideyoshi was truly ready for such a responsibility. The boy wasn't sure how to answer, but when the maid had saved his life the day before, he didn't think it was out of pity. It's human instinct to act when we witness suffering, a reflex that moves us before we even think. Hideyoshi was sure of this, and the girl, unfamiliar with the concept of human instinct, became thoughtful. He explained that he understood how those left behind feel, but this was his way of responding. With that, he decided it was best to quickly dispose of the trash and go back inside. Once inside, Hideyoshi formed a bond with the little creature and offered for the maid to hold it, but she seemed uneasy and declined. He noticed she had become distant since their earlier talk, so he placed the animal nearby, hoping it might lift her spirits, but she pulled away again. Hideyoshi wondered if she was afraid of dogs. She awkwardly admitted that she was a little, but if it was an order, she could touch it. Curious about the cause of her fear, Hitoyoshi asked, and the maid explained that as a child, her mentor had left her on a mountain surrounded by wild, aggressive dogs, a traumatic experience that had stayed with her. He understood how that could make caring for his animal difficult. The woman's fear made the maid feel helpless, so the young man quickly reassured her, explaining that it wasn't that he didn't want to leave the puppy alone. He thought it might be good for the girl to get used to it, as he didn't want the animal constantly passed from one person to another. Summoning her courage, the maid asked to hold the puppy. Despite trembling with fear, she faced her trauma and held the chubby, adorable creature. Hitoyoshi noticed the puppy was calm and wanted to understand what scared her most. She explained it was the puppy's sharp claws, wild fangs, and fierce eyes. To Hitoyoshi, however, it just looked like a sweet rice-like mochi. Suddenly, the puppy nipped the maid's finger, making her panic. Still, she managed not to toss the puppy aside. Afterward, the maid sat on the floor, shaken as if she had narrowly escaped disaster. She apologized for disappointing him, though Hitoyoshi was puzzled by her dramatic reaction, thinking the puppy's teeth were simply growing in. He suggested a trip to the vet to check on the puppy's health. At the vet, he asked the maid to pick up a few supplies like a chew toy, food bowl, food, and a leash. By late afternoon, they returned home, and Hitoyoshi thanked the maid for her assistance. She praised the master's kindness, noting that she'd never encountered anyone like him in her previous life. Where she came from, failure wasn't an option, so each act of kindness from the boy made her feel distant from him. Until then, she'd always done what was expected of her, but the boy's requests were completely different from what she knew. As a result, she continued to feel inadequate, as if her efforts were never enough. However, this sense of being unnecessary was not new to her. On the contrary, in her world, everyone struggled for a place to belong. Age and gender mattered little as long as you had the skills to perform, but her skills felt irrelevant here, making her feel even more out of place. If she'd encountered love like Hitoyoshi did with a little dog, or if she'd understood earlier that the world could be warm, perhaps she could have become what Hitoyoshi hoped. Still, she wondered if she could stay in her new employer's house, fearing he might find her unnecessary in this unfamiliar world. Just as she was about to speak, a dog tugged on the leash, pulling the boy to a corner. Only then did he turn to her, assuming she simply wanted to leave her old life behind and become a normal girl. She asked if that meant she should stop killing, and he replied that was how they understood their entire conversation. The maid struggled with an internal conflict, having never known life beyond the rigid expectations placed upon her. People had always said that to be useful, she needed to commit violent acts, and that had been the only path she knew. But now it seemed another option was appearing before her, one that Hitoyoshi highlighted when he invited her to watch the sunset. As she reflected on his description of life as warm and cozy, she began to wonder if she could find a place where she belonged without resorting to violence. Hitoyoshi admitted he had been afraid when she first arrived, but soon realized there was no need to fear. Spending time with her made him believe she was a good person. Hearing this, the maid repeatedly echoed the words "good girl" as though they were foreign to her, while memories of her early childhood affection resurfaced. She began to question what it meant to be normal and how to achieve it. Hitoyoshi explained that the concept of normalcy was complicated and the maid worried too much about making mistakes. He reassured her that making mistakes was simply part of life. Later, when she returned home, she chopped cabbage with extreme precision, thinking that being normal meant being efficient. Just then, a small dog nuzzled her leg, and in a panic, she nearly stabbed it, believing it was a threat. She realized too late that the dog was only hungry, so she calmly fed it, resolving the situation. She asked for more food, and Hitoyoshi responded that it's natural to want more of something we enjoy. He also told her that if she had any other requests, she should feel free to ask. The maid hoped he would give her a name, but unsure how to respond, Hitoyoshi tried to find a meaningful one. He asked when her birthday was, but she only remembered being born during a heavy snowstorm. This led him to suggest Yuki, which means snow. The maid recalled her former mentor had named her Snow, but Hitoyoshi redefined it, explaining that snow is not only beautiful and pure, but also provides warmth, nurturing crops through winter so they can sprout in the spring. At that moment, the maid wondered why she had acted on her own to save Hitoyoshi and why she felt so warm. Perhaps it was because he made her heart race, and by staying with him, she might one day understand why. Grateful for his kindness, she accepted the name Yuki. The following day, Riko, Hitoyoshi's younger sister, arrived at his house just as Yuki was playing with Ajima Kataru in the backyard. Her boss called her over, looking a bit hesitant and clearly embarrassed, and asked her to wait before revealing his reason. Eventually, he presented an ear-piercing device, explaining he had wanted his ears pierced ever since a friend did it, but couldn't summon the courage to do it on his own. He hoped Yuki, who wore earrings, might help, thinking she had experience. Yuki agreed but felt nervous, afraid of messing it up. She hesitated, then asked if this was some sort of initiation punishment, worrying she had done something wrong. Apologizing, she confessed she couldn't bring herself to put a hole in Hitoriyoshi's body. Surprised, Hitoriyoshi remarked that her job was about piercing people, so he hadn't expected this to be a problem. Just then, the doorbell rang. Riko, eager to see her brother's new puppy, was greeted by Yuki, who, not realizing it was Riko, asked to see the dog. When she realized it wasn't Hitoriyoshi, she asked if the woman was his younger sister, leaving Riko momentarily stunned. After being invited in, Riko marveled at the tidy living room and adored the puppy, but it was the beauty of her brother's new maid that truly captivated her. Annoyed that her brother hadn't mentioned this earlier, Riko nearly pinched his cheeks for keeping her in the dark despite their frequent chats. Hitoriyoshi explained he was worried their mother would find out and become anxious. Shifting to other family matters, Riko asked what he told their father, and he said he'd simply requested a new housekeeper. Their father had quickly agreed over the phone, though Riko wondered if it was trust or indifference. As Riko voiced her frustration about being left out, Yuki curiously asked if they lived separately, which Riko confirmed, though she soon turned away, embarrassed by the maid's beauty. Hitoriyoshi teased that Riko adored beautiful people, which was why he had mentioned Yuki to her. In return, Riko playfully squished him again, accusing him of trying to monopolize the maid. After that, Riko introduced herself as Hitoriyoshi's younger sister, and Yuki responded, explaining that Hitoriyoshi had chosen her name. Riko was surprised by his thoughtfulness, but she froze when Yuki mentioned her past as an assassin and how she'd asked Hitoriyoshi for a name because she hadn't had one. Despite Hitoriyoshi's attempt to stop her, the secret was out, leaving Riko trembling with shock. It wasn't fear, but excitement that filled Riko as she listened to the incredible story. She wanted an autograph from the strong, graceful woman, and so she quickly grabbed a notebook and asked Yuki to sign it. As Yuki complied, Riko admired her, thinking she looked more like a painting than a warrior. She whispered to her brother that Yuki seemed more like a lady than an assassin. After Yuki finished signing, Riko and Hitoriyoshi both noticed something odd about the signature. Riko mentioned that her handwriting was unusual, and Yuki explained she could speak 12 languages from her travels but never learned calligraphy. She apologized if the signature looked messy, but Riko thought it was more like a cute idol's autograph. Riko then excitedly announced that her vacation project would be about Yuki, but only if Yuki showed off her skills. Hitoriyoshi warned her not to write anything strange, so Riko promised it would just be a diary observing the beautiful assassin and her abilities. Hitoriyoshi, overwhelmed, buried his face in his hands. Yuki then led Riko to the garden, where she placed an apple on Riko's head, performed a backflip, and threw a knife into the fruit with perfect accuracy. Riko, thrilled, quickly took notes and asked where Yuki had hidden the knife. Yuki explained she kept 16 knives in her uniform, but reduced it to 5 after Hitoriyoshi's concern about safety. Yuki kept one item in her chest pocket while the others were tucked in her garter, raising her skirt to show them, though Hitoriyoshi suggested she be a bit less explicit. Heading back inside, Riko admired the small bell in Yuki's hair, but worried it might interfere with her tasks. Yuki assured her that when her target heard the bell, the job was already done. Something Riko found so impressive she jotted it in her journal. Her stomach growled, making Hitoriyoshi laugh, and he offered to get her lunch. When Riko asked what Yuki could cook, the maid modestly agreed to prepare something and began chopping cabbage efficiently, impressing Riko with her skill. Still, cabbage wasn't enough, so the Yokoi siblings took Yuki to a fast food place for burgers and fries. Hitoriyoshi saved the cabbage for dinner, while Riko spotted a poster for the summer festival, noting a stall with Yuki's favorite sauce, making the maid's mouth water in excitement. Riko was eager to attend the festival, and Hitoriyoshi was thrilled to take them. They arrived late in the afternoon, and Riko's eyes lit up at the vibrant atmosphere. Without hesitation, she pulled them to the shooting game but missed her first shot. Next, it was Yuki's turn. She aimed carefully but also missed, admitting that shooting wasn't her strength. Later, at the goldfish scooping game, Yuki showed impressive skill, teaching Riko that the trick was to remain unnoticed and strike quickly from behind the stall. The stall owner remarked on Riko's kind older sister, which made Yuki blush. The trio then visited a stall offering delicious tonkatsu sauce, and the maid was so moved by the tasty food that she teared up. Seeing her joy, the owner generously offered them another bite on the house. Meanwhile, Riko went off to get a drink. Unable to call her back, Hitoriyoshi decided to wait for her return, reluctant to risk losing sight of her. As they waited, he asked Yuki if she'd ever been to a festival. She remembered attending one, but not for fun. She had been there on duty. Just then, fireworks lit up the sky, captivating them until Riko returned. The three then sat together, enjoying the display. On the way back after picking up more sauce, Riko noted in her journal that Yuki had already eaten 8, suggesting they might pause for the day. Hitoriyoshi wondered who was acting like the older sister. Just then, A motorcyclist sped by after stealing a purse, nearly hitting Riko. Yuki saved her in time, leaving Riko amazed as no one except her father had carried her like that before. Hitoyoshi picked up their fallen things, remarking that such villains deserved divine punishment. Hearing this, Yuki dashed off to catch the thief. Riko urged them to follow so she could document Yuki's actions. They watched as Yuki threw her knives, stopping the motorcyclist. When she prepared to continue with more knives, Hitoyoshi begged her not to kill the man. She tapped the thief's helmet lightly, declaring it his punishment, and told Hitoyoshi she was hungry. They returned to the festival for more sauce, and Riko happily celebrated her best research project ever. Yuki asked if everyone had to do projects like this, revealing she'd never attended school. The child explained that school was a wonderful place to learn, make friends, and join clubs. Just then, Riko got a message from her mom about having stew for dinner, so she ran ahead to get home quickly. Later, Yuki told Hitoyoshi she had fun and that her day felt like a normal person experience. She also expressed an interest in going to school, which led Hitoyoshi to wonder about her age and encourage her to go if she wanted to. Days later, as August ended and a new semester began, Hitoyoshi grew concerned that Yuki might feel lonely at home. A friend then shared a rumor about a beautiful maid seen in town, which shocked Hitoyoshi as he worried these outings could draw attention to her. Another friend mentioned seeing her at the library, leaving him puzzled but relieved no one knew she was his maid. At that moment, the teacher introduced the new transfer student, Yuki Yokoya. Hitoyoshi sneezes milk onto his face as the teacher introduces the new student, his cousin Yuki, who will sit right in front of him. As Yuki takes her seat, she eagerly shares her excitement about studying near her friend and boss, leaving the class bewildered by the odd situation. After school, Riko approaches her brother full of curiosity, but Hitoyoshi is far from pleased. He quickly realizes it was all his sister's doing. Riko proudly admits her scheme, explaining that Yuki learned so quickly during their training that she started doing Riko's homework after just 3 days. Thrilled by Yuki's abilities, Riko and Yuki hatch the plan for her to enroll in school. Hitoyoshi bombards Yuki with questions. How did she transfer to his school, take his last name, and end up in his grave without saying a word? Yuki reveals she used her underworld connections to arrange the transfer and pretended to be his cousin at Riko's suggestion to make it easier. As for being in the same grade, Yuki admits she's probably older, but thought being in his class would help her serve him better. When asked why she kept it a secret, Yuki confesses she simply followed Riko's lead, as the younger girl insisted it would be more fun this way. Hitoyoshi slaps his younger sister on the head as a form of payback, leaving Yuki worried she might have upset him. However, Hitoyoshi quickly assures her he isn't angry, just a bit startled. Once he finishes explaining, he relaxes and declares that he's ready to enjoy a normal school life with his maid, which reassures Yuki and lightens the mood. A few days later at school, Hitoriyoshi's class dashes out of the room to snag the rare Katsuta bread as soon as the bell rings. Still seated, Hitoyoshi asks Yuki what she'd like for lunch, mentioning he might head to the convenience store. Intrigued, Yuki can't stop thinking about the Katsuta bread. Hitoyoshi explains its rarity. You have to run immediately after class to get it. Despite the challenge, Yuki seems captivated by the idea. Hitoyoshi warns that the school store closes early and the competition is fierce, especially since their classroom is the farthest from it. He also describes the bread's appeal, particularly the yakisoba bread filled with savory katsuta sauce. Yuki listens thoughtfully and responds, recalling advice from her mentor. You must pursue your goal, even if it's a tough battle. Assuring her boss that she will secure the prized katsuta bread without fail, Yuki leaps onto the school's rooftop. Hitoyoshi races after her, warning that drawing too much attention could spell trouble for him. However, the former assassin brushes off his concerns, pressing forward with the excitement of a child in a candy store. For someone with her level of determination, no obstacle, be it distance, cost, or effort, can deter her pursuit. Her concept of normal seems to have completely derailed, as if she's in a trance. Meanwhile, at the school entrance, Hitoyoshi spots the first wave of the Katsuta Brigade, which Riko helpfully explains is a group of devoted fans who tirelessly train to secure the coveted bread. Their passion runs so deep that they perform an eccentric dance while savoring its flavors. Hitoyoshi worries this could spell disaster for Yuki, as she'll have to confront the brigade head-on near the shop. But instead of a confrontation, Yuki gracefully vaults over the building, bypassing the crowd entirely and lands triumphantly at the front of the line. Once inside, the girl's eyes sparkle as she eagerly orders a loaf of katsura bread and a sandwich. A few minutes later, she returns to her boss, craving more after the shopkeeper explains that each person is limited to just one loaf. Hitoyoshi calmly picks up his portion, satisfied with just that, while Yuki insists he should eat it. However, he encourages her to enjoy it instead, as she was the one who retrieved the food, and he had tried it before. Though tempted to scold her for her antics, Hitoyoshi decides against it after seeing her delighted expression. Yuki then breaks off a piece of her bread to share with him. Initially reluctant, Hitoyoshi eventually accepts her offer and admits it's delicious. Later at home, Riko playfully squishes Eiji Machiteru's face and declares she'll sleep with the little dog that night. When Hitoyoshi points out that she's been with him often during summer vacation, Riko retorts that he gets to spend all his time with Yuki. She laments that, as someone who's always wanted a sister, she doesn't get the same chance. Riko imagines talking about fashion, love, or sneaking midnight snacks with a sister. In fact, she once tried to convince herself Hitoyoshi was her sister. Now, she believes it would be perfect if Yuki and Hitoyoshi married since, in her eyes, Yuki loves him. Hitoyoshi insists the maid isn't thinking about such things yet. The younger girl assures him she understands women better than he does. Speaking of which, he recalls how the maid gave him a bun yesterday, purely out of kindness and without any romantic intent. Riko stands firm in her perspective, noting that their mother would likely welcome the marriage idea, though their father might not. Just then, Yuki arrives and overhears, asking who's getting married. Riko explains they were discussing the maid becoming her sister and even asks Yuki if she likes Hitoyoshi. Yuki admits she admires him greatly, leaving him flustered. Meanwhile, the youngest requests the maid to peel a persimmon. Later, the three gather in the backyard, where the youngest remarks that Yuki never wears makeup but still looks like every girl's ideal beauty. Yuki acknowledges her natural looks have been helpful, but insists she isn't as pretty as Riko's friend. Yuki then compliments the youngest girl, calling her cute and perceptive, making Riko both happy and shy since she rarely hears such praise. Emboldened, Riko asks if she could ever be as beautiful as Yuki. The maid jokes that ever since trying tonkatsu sauce, her skin has softened, urging Riko to try it. Riko samples the persimmon with the sauce and finds it delicious. Watching them, Hitoyoshi reflects on how close Yuki and his sister have grown, almost like they're already family, thanks to Riko's efforts. Riko interrupts her brother's thoughts with a playful tease, asking if he'd like a fiancé like Yuki. Embarrassed, Hitoyoshi admits he would, prompting Riko to declare them engaged on the spot. Meanwhile, a mysterious cat watches from the bushes. The next day at school, Hitoyoshi recalls how his sister clung to him and Yuki all weekend, leaving him sleep-deprived. Exhausted, he dozes off in class, and the teacher throws a piece of chalk at him. Yuki skillfully slices it mid-air, but the pieces still hit his eyes, landing him in the infirmary. There, he discovers that the former nurse Maruyama has been replaced by Nida, who introduces herself as the new nurse. Hitoyoshi finds her oddly mysterious for the role. When she asks if the beautiful girl with him is a friend or girlfriend, he awkwardly explains that Yuki is his cousin. Nida laughs, remarking they look nothing alike and adding that someone like him is more her type. Startled by the unexpected flirtation, Hitoyoshi thanks her, confused. She reassures him his eyes are fine but suddenly locks the infirmary door, pushes him onto the stretcher and kisses his tie. Stunned, Hitoyoshi mutters that even adult manga have more build-up than this. Nida reassures him not to worry and casually mentions Hitoyoshi's name, prompting him to ask how she knows it. Instead of answering, she promises to make his first experience unforgettable. Before anything else happens, Yuki bursts into the infirmary. Startled, Hitoyoshi hides behind the maid, while Nida plays it off as a joke and offers him eye drops. Yuki, however, pulls her boss away, warning the nurse to stay back. Seeing Yuki's protective behavior, Hitoyoshi recalls his sister's words and starts to wonder if Yuki might be jealous. Yuki eventually drags him out of the room, leaving Nida behind talking to herself. Outside, Yuki apologizes for being so abrupt and tells Hitoyoshi she has something to share. His heart races, but instead of a confession, she reveals that the nurse is also an assassin, just like her. Back in the infirmary, a cat approaches Nida, who pets it while commenting that Yuki isn't as uninvolved as she seems. Using images gathered by the cat, Nida vows to end Yuki's pretend family. Grace, a determined woman, dreams of a luxurious life surrounded by handsome men on the picturesque island of Santorini. To bring her vision to life, she has meticulously gathered valuable knowledge and leveraged it strategically, even eliminating obstacles along the way. Now her lifelong dream is almost within reach, with one final step, obtaining Su's head, also known as Yuki. Meanwhile, at 12:31 a.m., Yuki is vigilantly guarding Hitoyoshi, to the point where the boy struggles to sleep. Yuki insists her watchfulness is necessary, fearing Grace might return and harm him, a thought that unsettles her deeply. Realizing the situation he's in, Hitoyoshi feels overwhelmed but asks Yuki if there's a less intense way for her to protect him. In response, she decides to lie next to him, though her unconventional method does little to ease his discomfort. Despite this, he doesn't object. Hitoyoshi mentions being more concerned about Grace targeting Yuki rather than himself. but she confidently assures him that she's fully capable of handling any attack even in her sleep. During the day, Yuki only had a small knife hidden in her uniform, but it was enough to intimidate the school nurse. This gave her some reassurance for now, as she doubted the nurse would dare to attack so boldly. However, this confidence left Hitoyoshi wondering if his maid might actually be a highly skilled assassin. Yuki wasn't sure how the woman had tracked her down, but it seemed her past was catching up with her, pulling Hitoyoshi into the chaos. Despite this, Yuki asked him not to worry, assuring him that protecting others was her expertise. She promised to defend him at all costs because he was the one who had shown her the meaning of human warmth. Hitoyoshi admitted he was deeply concerned about her, especially since he felt powerless to help, but Yuki vowed to keep his words in mind. As Hitoyoshi moved to open a window, Yuki stepped in front of him, fearing the possibility of a sniper targeting the room. Just then, she caught the scent of katsudon sauce wafting in from the house's front gate, briefly distracting her. In that moment, Grace seized the opportunity to capture Hitoyoshi and mock Yuki, claiming she had lost her edge. Grace taunted that Yuki, once known as the White Wolf of the Nine Sons of the Dragon, had become sloppy, distracted by playing house. As Yuki pulled out a knife, Grace smugly reminded her that she could injure Hitoyoshi's eye before Yuki could strike, leaving the maid at a disadvantage. Yuki reveals her true nature by adopting a chilling demeanor, threatening her enemy with unimaginable suffering, promising Grace will beg for mercy that will never come. Realizing the White Wolf hasn't lost her edge, Grace understands the conflict involves her. The woman needs the maid dead but knows she lacks the strength to kill Shu, even in 1,000 years. Instead, she plans to use a boy as leverage, demanding Sue meet her at the school at 2:00 a.m., assuring his safety until then. After witnessing her friend taken away, Yuki recalls her master's words. She was born to kill, with death clinging to her no matter how much she denies it. Reflecting on this, Yuki blames herself for putting Hitoyoshi in danger and acknowledges that her dream of a normal life was fleeting. Her master once said Sue's cold detachment defines her fate, leaving no other path. Resigned, Yuki adopts a sinister resolve, vowing to kill Grace and erase all traces of the incident. She plans to ensure Hitoyoshi's safety, leave the country, and embrace life as Sue once more. However, memories of Hitoyoshi's desire to protect her and the joyful moments with Riko stir her longing for normalcy, igniting a deep inner conflict within her. Grace ties Hitoyoshi to the school soccer field, remarking that this setup suits him. She muses about trying ropes next time for a better effect. Moving on, she asks if he's scared, pointing out that his life rests entirely in her hands. To her, his life is so insignificant that ending it would be effortless. Grace blames Yuki for this predicament and tries to plant resentment in Hitoyoshi's mind, asking if he hates Yuki for putting him in danger. Hitoyoshi, head bowed, admits he's terrified but trusts Yuki's promise to protect him. Frustrated, Grace begrudgingly acknowledges his bravery, comparing him to a hamster but noting his resilience is unsurprising for someone who tamed Sue. Grace reveals she doesn't care whether Hitoyoshi lives or dies. Her real goal is to eliminate Sue herself, viewing any casualties as collateral damage. When Hitoyoshi asks why she calls Yuki Sue, Grace explains that Sue was a true monster, standing out even among the world's most dangerous people. A ruthless assassin, Sue spared no one and lived only to kill. Known as the White Wolf, she was the fourth of the 9 dragon children, a group of elite assassins responsible for humanity's most significant events. However, their infamy also made them prime targets for countless opposing factions. Grace knows that if she can take down one of them, she'll earn a significant reward and elevate her reputation, opening doors to prestigious, high-paying opportunities that align with her dreams. Hitoyoshi, however, notes that Yuki is just a quiet 16-year-old who loves tonkatsu sauce. Grace admits she was so struck by Yuki's innocence that she momentarily saw her in a different light, especially when overhearing her talk about marriage on the balcony. Despite this, Grace reflects privately that Hitoyoshi must have something special to soften Shu's heart, a rare feat as people often grow vulnerable when protecting someone they deeply care about. At 2 a.m., Sue launches an attack, dodging Grace's pistol shots with her knives. Anticipating this, Grace detonates hidden landmines, triggering a massive explosion and prematurely declaring victory. However, Stead reemerges from the smoke, forcing Grace into a close call to block her strike. Gaining some distance, Grace provokes Sue, accusing her of hiding her past to avoid rejection from Hitoyoshi. Despite this, Yuki remains unfazed, reminding them that her boss has class early the next morning and urging them to wrap it up quickly. As Yuki speaks, she keeps thoughts of Hitoyoshi Riko, Ejimo Kitaru, and Katsuda sauce in mind, even while observing a shift in her opponent's demeanor. Grace wonders if Sue is heartless enough to let the boy lose an arm and activates the laser sights on rifles aimed at his limbs to deter reckless moves. Despite this, Yuki charges forward without hesitation. Grace recalls her mentor's words, "The The white wolf never lets prey escape. Convinced Iksu doesn't care about the boy, Grace fires at Hitoyoshi, but Yuki counters by throwing knives to deflect all 4 bullets, shielding him. Grace realizes her mistake. Using the lasers to intimidate only made her vulnerable. When she attempts to deploy other devices via her phone, Yuki destroys it with a knife. The 4th of the 9 dragon children declares Grace defeated. Desperately, Grace tries to draw her weapon, but is disarmed and knocked down by Yuki's swift strikes. Facing her end, Grace panics, scrambling for a distraction. Unable to devise a plan, she hurls an insult, warning that even if Yuki kills her, more assassins will come to claim the bounty on her head. Yuki realizes she'll spend the rest of her life taking lives, which is far from a normal existence. Though the white wolf might have once accepted this fate, she now refuses to keep killing or let others die because of her. Determined to change, she resolves to build a new identity and seek a normal life among people who truly care for her. The Maid frees her companion, and Grace reflects that Yuki, despite everything, is just a stubborn, innocent woman who won't stop until she achieves her goals. Thinking of how close she was to death, Grace lets out a despairing laugh. After leaving the school, Hitoyoshi remarks on the day's excitement, confident that Yuki would save him. Taking the cue, Yuki apologizes for endangering him and offers to leave his life if he wishes. Instead, he takes her hand and asks her to teach him self-defense, determined to support her however he can. Together, they walk away hand in hand. A few days later, Yuki dazzles on a volleyball court, showcasing her talent with the grace and precision of a professional athlete. Her exceptional skills leave everyone speechless, especially the boys, who struggle to comprehend how someone like Hitoyoshi, who they view as a nobody, could possibly be related to someone so gifted. Hitoyoshi, however, is too preoccupied with lingering thoughts about Nida, a school doctor who had previously unveiled Yuki's shocking secret as one of the dragon's 9 offspring. This revelation has only deepened Hitoyoshi's fascination with Yuki and her mysterious background. During the game, Yuki flashes him a brief smile, igniting a storm of jealousy among the boys. Their reactions are cut short when a rogue volleyball hurtles toward Hitoyoshi, only for him to be rescued by none other than Nida, now revealing her true identity as Grace. To complicate matters, Grace has taken up the guise of a PE teacher and claims to be Hitoyoshi's cousin. The story rewinds to a few weeks earlier, when Grace first disclosed her real identity as a skilled assassin, focusing on intelligence and tactics. Unlike Yuki, who excels in combat with knives, Grace revealed her interest in staying close to them, drawn to the curious dynamic of the legendary assassin, she being bound to someone as seemingly mundane as Hitoyoshi. To ensure her extended presence, Grace offered a peculiar bargain: an endless supply of katsudo sauce bread for 3 months in exchange for their tolerance of her presence. While Hitoyoshi agonized over what he thought might be some covered assassin code, Yuki casually accepted the deal, more excited by the promise of delicious bread than the complexities of Grace's motives. Despite Hitoyoshi's concerns, Yuki reassured him that Grace had no intent to harm them and vowed to protect him at all costs, though her enthusiasm for the bread clearly betrayed her true priorities. In the present, Grace discards her passive observer role, opting instead to openly tease Hitoyoshi. Her playful antics irritate Yuki, who retaliates by delivering a powerful volleyball serve so intense that it nearly demolishes the gym wall, much to everyone's astonishment. Rather than facing scolding, Yuki becomes the focus of admiration as her classmates marvel at her powerful serve. During lunch, she confides in Hitoyoshi, admitting she feels flustered by her earlier actions. When he gently prods for more, she reveals that seeing him close to another assassin left her feeling out of place and even a little envious. Understanding her jealousy, Hitoyoshi reassures her that such emotions are completely normal, a sentiment that lightens her mood. Over the weekend, Yuki starts her day by tackling laundry in her maid outfit, a task she had struggled with for weeks. This time, after repeated failures, she finally masters it, leaving her beaming with pride as though she were a parent admiring their child's achievement. Hitoyoshi, witnessing her happiness, can't help but feel a swell of pride as well. When dinner approaches, they discover the only ingredient left is cabbage. While Yuki daydreams about pairing it with katsudo sauce, Hitoyoshi surprises her by bringing home pork katsu from his favorite food stall. Overjoyed, Yuki is nearly brought to tears at the sight of so much katsudo sauce. As they eat, she curiously asks Hitoyoshi if he's ever felt a similar thrill. Reflecting, he shares memories of visiting the Hero Theater as a child, where the sheer wonder of his favorite things left him spellbound. Yuki finds his story surprisingly relatable. Watching the elderly vendor expertly prepare their cutlet, Yuki marvels at his skill, even joking that he might secretly be a samurai. The vendor's wife casually mentions that they were the creators of katsudo sauce, prompting Yuki to elevate them to divine status. She profusely thanks them for their culinary genius, which she now credits with transforming her relationship with food. Deeply moved, the grandmother explains that the secret to the sauce's magic is the warmth and joy poured into it. Yuki, savoring her newfound appreciation for flavors, smiles warmly and expresses her heartfelt gratitude, knowing this simple meal has brought her a kind of happiness she never thought possible. Yuki ponders deeply on this sentiment, realizing that the warmth she feels is tied to her growing bond with Hitoyoshi. She agrees with the grandmother's wise words, her thoughts drifting away when the grandfather suddenly materializes behind her, casually brushing dust off her shoulder. Startled by how silently the old man approached, Yuki feels more awe than alarm. She's impressed, convinced the seemingly frail man might once have been a retired samurai turned pork cutlet artisan. Her musings are interrupted by the grandmother, who cheerfully offers Yuki a sample of a new sauce recipe. Like a cat drawn to cream, Yuki eagerly accepts the spoonful. The taste is a revelation, and with one bite, she feels transported to another realm, overwhelmed by its exquisite flavor. Later that evening, after the group finishes their meal, Hitoyoshi finds himself wrestling with conflicting emotions. He remains curious about the mysteries surrounding the dragon's 9 offspring, yet he hesitates. Watching Yuki's newfound happiness in this peaceful life, he feels that prying into her past might only bring her unnecessary pain. He understands that pain all too well as he falls asleep and dreams of his mother, who left him when he was young. In his dream, he longs to hold her one last time, but she slips away, leaving him with an ache he can't erase. Awakening with tears streaming down his face, he unconsciously hums Yuki's name. Yuki notices his distress and softly informs him that she found him sleepwalking. Embarrassed, Hitoyoshi stumbles in his apology, accidentally bumping into her. Understanding the unspoken weight of his sorrow, Yuki invites him to rest his head on her lap, offering gentle solace. Just as the moment turns quiet, Hitoyoshi's phone slips from his pocket. As Yuki picks it up, she notices he's been researching her mysterious past. Taking a steadying breath, Yuki admits she doesn't know much about the dragon's 9 offspring either, her voice calm but reflective. As an assassin, she had always adhered strictly to her master's commands, never formally becoming part of the organization. While she occasionally encountered its members, their names or identities never mattered to her. Her sole focus remained on completing her assignments and avoiding any hint of failure in her master's eyes. Yuki confesses that her past continues to cast a long shadow over her, making her current life feel like a fleeting, warm illusion. However, every time she gazes at Hitoyoshi, she is reminded of what she truly longs for: the chance to live as an ordinary girl. Touched by her candor, Hitoyoshi admits that he feels a similar longing. After his experience with Grace, he has been yearning to connect with her more deeply and support her in realizing her dream. Yuki responds with a gentle, heartfelt smile, causing Hitoyoshi to blush in spite of himself. Encouraged by his genuine emotions, Yuki decides to open up further. She reveals that the reason she enjoys letting him rest on her lap is because, during the first time it happened, she felt for the first time that she was offering someone real comfort. It was a moment of genuine connection that left a lasting impact. She reassures him that whenever he is haunted by nightmares, her lap will always be there to soothe him. Moved by her sincerity, Hitoyoshi confesses that his recent dream wasn't a nightmare at all. Instead, it was something hopeful, a vision of Yuki experiencing the warmth and solace that had been absent from his life since his mother left. Yuki starts her day like any other, waking up, getting dressed, and diving into her daily tasks. She feels a quiet sense of pride as she finishes the laundry, recalling how challenging it once was for her. Afterward, she cleans the dishes, spends some time playing with her dog, and moves on to the rest of her routine. In the afternoon, she heads to the market to pick up groceries. On the way, she notices lingering glances from the men she passes, which makes her a bit uneasy. While browsing the stalls, a young child approaches her, compliments her beauty, and then innocently remarks that her maid outfit seems strange for an ordinary girl. Caught off guard, Yuki becomes self-conscious. Later, she bumps into Hitoyoshi, who has just bought some books, and nervously asks if there's any truth to the child's comment. Sensing her discomfort, Hitoyoshi suggests they go shopping for new clothes to ease her mind. When they arrive at the store, they unexpectedly run into Riko and Grace. Hitoyoshi, irritated, demands to know why they're there, calling them meddlesome. Riko explains she came to help her brother choose clothes, while Grace smugly admits she hacked his phone to track his location, eager to see Yuki try on outfits. Riko teases Grace about her assassin background, but instead of responding, Grace hugs her in a way that unsettles Hitoyoshi. Taking charge, Riko suggests a store, but instead of finding modest attire, Yuki ends up trying on increasingly bold maid outfits. Riko snaps pictures of Yuki for her personal collection, prompting an exasperated Hitoyoshi to reprimand her for picking such a store. Grace then proposes another shop, and despite Hitoyoshi's hesitations, the situation somehow spirals even further into chaos. Yuki tries on various outfits that make her resemble a dancer from the Vanilla Unicorn, much to Hitoriyoshi's discomfort. The group continues browsing, experimenting with a variety of styles, some genuinely elegant and others shockingly provocative. Each time they turn to Hitoriyoshi for his thoughts. When he timidly suggests a plain white one-piece dress, Grace teasingly accuses him of hiding perverted tendencies, much to his embarrassment. After enduring the chaotic shopping spree, the group wraps up their purchases. With Halloween on the horizon, Riko proposes they look for costumes. Yuki tries on ensembles like a witch and a police officer, each one enhancing her striking beauty. Meanwhile, Hitoriyoshi notices a poster for a horror movie and excitedly shares his love for the genre. Grace and Riko eagerly suggest they all go see it, but Yuki looks confused. When questioned, she admits she's been to a cinema before, but only during assassination missions, never for entertainment. Later, the group heads to the theater to watch the film. Despite her background as a highly skilled assassin, Yuki finds the zombies in the movie horrifying. Afterward, as she struggles to shake off the fear, Hitoriyoshi reassures her, reminding her that her abilities could easily handle any zombie threat. Still unsettled, Yuki vents to Hitoriyoshi about the idea of decaying corpses wandering around, rumbling that their rotting mouths could use a breath mint. Observing her reactions, Hitoriyoshi realizes that Yuki interprets everything through the lens of her assassin experiences. To lighten the mood, they grab some creeps and enjoy them together. The lively atmosphere catches the attention of a pink-haired girl named Naka, watching from afar with longing. She wishes she could join in the fun, but her teacher scolds her, urging her to remain vigilant and cautious. As Grace makes her way home, Hitoriyoshi offers to accompany Riko back, suggesting that Yuki go on ahead without them. Yuki, however, decides to take a slight detour, pausing to admire herself in the stylish clothes she recently purchased. Although the new outfit is undeniably elegant, her thoughts keep wandering back to her maid uniform. After a moment of contemplation, she decides to change back into it, feeling more at ease in its familiar comfort. Once dressed, she spends some time playing with her energetic dog, Ajimokataru. While they're playing, Yuki suddenly realizes she hasn't done any laundry all day. Spotting Ajimokataru's grimy towel, she decides to wash it, but Ajimokataru isn't keen on parting with it. He snatches the towel and dashes off playfully. Just as she's about to chase him, the power unexpectedly goes out, and the eerie flashes of lightning outside remind Yuki of a chilling zombie movie she recently watched. Amid the chaos, Ajimokataru runs around with a towel in his mouth and crashes into a table, sending food flying everywhere. The mess lands on him, leaving him smeared with food and clutching the towel. The unsettling scene startles Yuki. Ajimokataru, with food covering his fur and the towel dangling from his mouth, looks like a creature straight out of a nightmare. Acting on instinct, Yuki grabs a nearby knife and slices the towel in two. Ajimokataru lets out a heart-wrenching cry over his ruined possession, leaving Yuki feeling guilty. She quickly promises to repair the towel, though it seems beyond saving. Moments later, Hitoriyoshi arrives, clearly amused but doubtful of her ability to fix the mangled towel after witnessing its sorry state. Although he finds it a bit unusual, he supports her decision and admires her determination. When Hitoriyoshi sees that Yuki has changed back into her maid outfit, he asks if she dislikes the clothes they bought together earlier. Yuki reassures him that she adores the new clothes but explains that her maid uniform is a treasured gift from her late master. It was he who encouraged her dream of living a normal life, and the outfit is the only keepsake she has left of him. She nervously asks if it's alright to keep wearing it, even if it makes her seem strange. With a warm smile, Hitoriyoshi tells her that there's absolutely nothing wrong with being herself, whether she's someone afraid of zombies, a former assassin, or simply a girl who loves her maid outfit. He reminds her that everyone has their own quirks, and what truly matters is staying true to who she is. Touched by his words, Yuki feels a comforting warmth, and Ajimokataru barks in agreement. Picking up Ajimokataru, Hitoriyoshi notices the tattered towel he's been carrying and realizes it's the same one they discovered earlier. He guesses the dog cherishes it because it carries the scent of his parents. Hearing this, Yuki becomes even more determined to repair it, sharing that she too has a cherished keepsake, a small bell that reminds her of her sister. This revelation takes Hitoriyoshi by surprise, as he never knew Yuki had a sibling. If you're enjoying the journey of this series, please hit that like and subscribe button and turn on that notification bell so you don't miss any updates. All of your support helps me to keep bringing more high-quality recaps.